Ba-da-da-da-ba-da-ba. GetScene!
Cool. Hey everyone, we're here with Dr. Stephen Tang from Tang Inclusion, and he's here just to chat all about what he does with the responsibilities of accessibility to websites and his clients. So, hey Steve, how's it going, man?
Hi, I'm good. I'm well, thank you. How are you, Dave?
Yeah, all good in the hood. Yes, so basically, from what I mentioned, you do a lot of accessibility for your clients for their websites. I'm just wondering whether you can chat a little bit more, because I know, we've known each other for years, and for everyone out there, Dr. Tang, he was my boss in the old job. he left the old job to do his company. I kind of followed suit. So yeah, he's a very good trendsetter, and he's very intelligent about everything that he does. So yeah, so what is it exactly that your company does with the accessibility to websites?
So basically what we do is we help companies to make their applications, mobile apps and websites accessible or usable by the disabled people.
Oh, great.
There's a disabled people. It's a group of people that are not often neglected in the digital world. They have their ways to actually use the informations and the functionalities. However, most developers tend to just develop them for normal users.
Yeah, so yeah, developers often fall into the category of developing an app for themselves, even though it's for a client, and they're not really thinking about their client's duty. So although I've mentioned about, you're doing websites, I didn't know that you was doing apps as well. So is there a vast difference between websites and apps?
Well, apps and websites follow through different types of API when they communicate with what we call assistive technology. So one of the things that, for instance, smartphone users will be using, especially those disabled people, are voice assistants or things like talkback and voice over that will help you narrate the roles or even the content on the app.
Okay.
So the way the API basically tells this assistive technology how to announce the semantics and the roles are actually very different from how HTML is being programmed.
Yeah.
So for instance, in an app itself, there's no notions of, for instance, button. There's no radio button in the what do you call the iOS app.
Yeah.
They just turned as a two states button or multiple states button.
Okay.
Whereas in websites you have what we call radio button. And then if you're making radio button, for instance, you might need to consider grouping them semantically, because we can visually group them to tell them that it belongs to a group, because you can choose one of those 3 options, for instance. However, blind people wouldn't know until you provide the semantics of it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, especially like when you, as you said, a blind person, how did you know that things are grouped? So you just have a massive list of radio buttons, radio button 1, 2, 3, 4, going up to 27. They might be grouped individually, but the item names might just be 1 to 27, don't they? A program will just read them and just go, okay, I know what they are. Where if you're trying to explain to someone, you do need all these extra semantics, don't you, to actually explain to a user, to someone who can't see or someone who's hard of sight, fully understand and fully visualize a site that they can't see. So from that point of view, is there any other kind of huge gotchas when people should be designing the sites? So what I mean by that is like some of the common pitfalls that people do.
Yeah, and there are a few disability groups that people need to think about. So visual disability is one. Visual impairment, and then you have hearing impairment, and then you have those which has physical impairment, and some with also learning difficulties. So when creating content, you need to think about how these people will perceive your content. So for instance, most people who program buttons in the modern way using HTML, JavaScript frameworks, they might be using completely JavaScript approach to program a button. Now, in that case, there might be a few problems. For instance, if a button is just an image, the image has no way to convey the information of what this button label is to the blind people. That's one. The second problem you might find is people who have physical disability. They can't use mouse a lot or temporary disability. They will need to use tab keys. However, because it's being implemented in JavaScript using mouse events, keyboard events wouldn't pick up. So they will not be able to use that functionality.
Okay, so it's like programming like 5 different ways to click a button, because obviously if you can't click a button with a mouse, how can you click a button? It makes sense once you talk through it and you actually put yourself into someone else's shoes, and you have to think about how they physically interact with said keyboard or device. And obviously with being so many different devices and touch screens, I bet you it's a hard task for you to kind of audit an app and audit a website.
We have a number of checklists that we go through, and we need to look into it and test everything using the tools and softwares that normally people with disability would use. And then we need to judge basically if that is an issue of a high priority that needs to fix, that inhibits someone to actually perform a task, or it is something that can create a workaround way.
Okay.
Then they need to actually work on it. So I'll give you an example of something which consider a high priority. So obviously a button that cannot be operated using keyboard, it's very high because you are neglecting one group of people. Not only that, sometimes you might think people who have without disability, or for instance, people working on computer all the time, they need to work very quickly. So they'll use tap keyboards very quickly, very often, rather than mouse fiddling around, especially people in the banking industry.
Yeah, definitely.
Filling forms are, they need to do it quick. So it will actually slow down the productivity. So for something which is low, for instance, it will be, for instance, the label has been made very ambiguous or inconsistent. For instance, you have a visual label that says search, and then you have another what we call accessible label that is being announced by the screen reader as find this. So although it's the same meaning, sometimes there's a what we call a judgment there, whether are you giving the same information to the visual user and to the disabled user. So what you want to do is you want to bring the gap between the normal user's experience and the disabled user's experience to the same level.
So it's for like a developer and a, say, web developer or an app developer, you've got 2 different strands there. How hard is it for them to actually create this? Because obviously your background, you've done a bit of programming when you was at John Moore's, teaching it for years. So yeah, like, can you have any insight into how hard it is for someone to learn about all the accessibility add-ons, so say for iOS or for websites, or how long it will potentially take for a development team to implement some of these changes?
Well, if they begin in the design stage, so for instance, there are a few things that designers should be aware of. The first thing is, understanding, the first tier, colors. Okay, making sure all the colors doesn't clash with the corporate branding, and then, as in, it is having enough contrast. Okay, then that is easier to move on, because then you don't need to do a lot of UX changes.
That makes sense.
Then in terms of the developer wise, then that's when they need to start to think about, if possible, use native HTML implementation, because like the HTML button itself has all the semantics. But the moment you start to use an image, you slap on a JavaScript on top of it, you're trying to make it very customized and very stylish. And that's where all the problem starts to come in, because all the semantics are gone. You need to put it back in.
Yeah,
There are ways to put them back in, and basically these are all available online as well.
Okay, so basically, rule of thumb, just learn your HTML through and through if you're a web developer. So for everyone doing like a lot of WordPress development, you should be using the HTML buttons, but often a time, as you said, if it's an image click to go onto another web page, basically, long story short, that's a big no-no, I take it, because it's just an image and it says go to this page, where if you're being read this, it'll give the image name and then it won't say, okay, this is an actual button to be clickable. That makes sense, doesn't it?
So one way to fix it, for instance, if let's say you're using an image as a link, so the image itself can't be read as a text, but what you have within the image is an alt property.
Yeah, okay.
So provide a meaningful alt. That way, when the link is being focused on, screen readers will actually announce the alternative text. There's a text for it to announce.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of people who get into web development, they always leave the alt text. So I was like, yeah, I most probably got a couple on my website now because there's a lot of images about depending on what pages they are. But it's the understanding of the alt text isn't for you, but Google is also downgrading websites if you don't have alt text in a lot of the images because it needs to be a bit more accessible. So obviously you got the HTTPS, more secure, Google ranks you higher, but it also goes hand in hand with these accessibilities, don't they? So more you get, more groundwork that you do, more information in there to accommodate everyone and just, be more inclusive. You just get higher up in the ranks. So it makes sense, and especially to hire someone like yourself to do all that legwork. I've always had the impression like, oh yeah, I can do everything myself. But now, since running a business for roughly a year and a half, 18 months maybe, long times, it's just hire someone who knows a lot more and who can do a better job. It makes complete sense. Just pay the money over, get the job done. And talking about that, for your company, you hand out certificates, don't you?
So basically what we do is we provide clients with an audit. We can do training. We can do strategy. Okay. So to help them to come up with a long-term plan, how they can make all their digital products or services and functionalities accessible. And also what we do is we do something called the VPAT. So VPAT is something, for instance, if you want to declare your websites or digital products to be accessible, then that is something that you need to do. And to get a VPAT, you need to go through a thorough audit process. Okay. And any issues that you found, you need to fix it, and then we can advise the clients how to actually approach that from the technical point of view. So we work hand in hand with the clients and the developers as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. So basically it's just hand all the work off to you, and you are the strategy, you are the actual perfect expertise in this case, aren't you?
Yeah, so basically, depending on the size of the organization, so some may have just one website, so that's pretty straightforward. They wouldn't need much strategy. So what we can offer is basically sprint type of audits, and then let them understand, and through that basically their developers is actually learning how to make future websites accessible as well. So doing the audit itself, there are multiple purpose. So one for us is to help them come up with a sort of a document to somewhat certify that they are the website or apps are inclusive. Okay. And the other one, it's basically for them, the developers themselves, the team itself, to learn more about how they can actually make better
changes in the future.
Yeah, correct.
That makes complete sense. So just on that point of view, then, why would a company want to do this if they're already kind of selling stuff and they haven't had any interest from any say disabled people or different groups of people who can't use the websites? What are some of the issues about this? So obviously we touched on it before, about how you could potentially be sued. And I remember us talking maybe a year and a half ago about this and some of the examples that you found in America, where a lot of people, look out for websites with no accessibility or very little accessibility,
Yes.
and then just take them to court. So was it like a RICO case or what's the term in America where there's like a group of like the public take a company to court, but each one of the public?
Or class suit.
That's it. Yeah. So I remember you spoke about, was it Burger King?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts, that's it. Yeah. So can you remind us of like what actually happened in that situation? So
basically, if I recall correctly, the case happened when a person with a visual impairment who tried to actually look for a Dunkin' Donuts store, but he or she went to the website, corporate website, and couldn't use it at all to find an address, and he wanted to have Dunkin' Donuts badly, obviously, and
they are nice.
he represented the whole disability community and take Dunkin' Donuts to the court. So in the US, they have this act, the Disability Act. So basically, in the UK, we have very similar one. We call the Equality Act. Right, and in the EU as well, we have. So pretty much in most of the Western countries, they have something similar. And basically, what you want to do is you do not want to discriminate these type of people, and that's one part of it. But like I said, you mentioned before, disability people, there are people with slight disadvantages, but doesn't mean they should be ignored. They are paying customers as well. They like services and products as well. They like to be independent, and making websites and apps accessible to them means that you're giving them the independence that they need, and they can potentially be one of the clients. So in the stats, it shows that what people do not know is this is a huge number of people with some form of disability. And don't get me wrong, you are talking about 10 to 15%, right, of new customers potentially joining your platforms or using your service or buying your products. But also, the number doesn't stop there, because as we grow old, we will acquire some form of disability. I'm wearing glasses now. My glasses will, my eyesight will become deteriorate. So, in time, if I actually views website that doesn't allow me to change the font size, then it will be very difficult for me to actually use that service or that website. So in the future, I might find an alternative one that offers me the ability to actually use them easily to accommodate my needs.
Which is very true. And like with a lot of like elderly people now, like not getting out, potentially they do have like disposable income. They've got pensions that are coming in.
Exactly.
Like, they want to relive their lives, which makes complete sense, don't they? It's like, and how can you do that? Well, you buy stuff, you go on adventures. It makes sense. So you need to make sure that your site and your apps or your devices are at a standard where everyone can use them. As you said, like any disability, it's even the disability, although we don't see it as being a disability on the record, it is, to have glasses. It makes sense. So just make things a little bit easier for everyone. So you have to, like, do you remember how much Dunkin' Donuts got sued for and whether they won the case?
They lost the case, obviously, but normally they don't actually
disclose how
publicize much. How much when we do not know.
Okay, fair enough. But they lost. That's the main thing.
Yes, they lost. They need to pay something. They need to get that fixed.
So, but it's also not the representation. They kind of respect that the company would lose, wouldn't they? Because they've been seen like, they lost. They were in the wrong. So and I think it's highlighting that people should be doing it in this country, because the Equality Act, as you said, everyone needs to. So
actually, council-wise, there's a lot of government websites are actually putting serious efforts into accessibility, especially with the digital transformations that the country is going through. They have sort of like ask councils' websites and government websites to have them accessible. That's mainly because in situation like this, pandemic-wise, where a lot of the physical face-to-face services can't be actually set up, can't run, can't operate. Online it's important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And especially like what you just said, like people can't get out. So if you're at a bank, people can't just walk into the bank, because I think at this stage, it is forcing more people to go online. It's like my neighbors.
Correct.
I think if they ever watch this, they might be horrified of how old I think they are, but I think they're around about 70, maybe 75, 80. And they're just starting sending emails to me. And it's great, the fact that they're now on emails, but it's taken them years to get on emails and then get a new computer. Because like before COVID, I was always around, helping them set up and everything. Where now it's just, like, oh, did you hear about this? Or did you see this? And I phone them up, oh, do you need a paper getting? Because obviously they can't leave the house. So we can just go to the shop. But they're like, oh no, we've read all the news online now. It's like, oh, great, sweet. The kind of way it's going. But it's just great. But you still need to be inclusive of them, because they are paying customers. And as you said, what is the figures? Like 12 to 15%? Or
10 to 15%, yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge kind of clientele. Like that's 15 potential customers out of every 100 customers that has some form of disability.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, sometimes if you think about it, normal users would use these approaches that people who are disabled use, in certain situations. So I'll give you an example. So for instance, sometimes we watch, videos on YouTube at night, and you're sleeping or in a quiet place where you can't have sound. So you would rely on one thing, captions.
Yeah.
And basically, in other words, you have hearing impairment. You can't hear.
Yeah,
but that is a temporary condition due to the situation. You're not disabled, it's just that you can't use that sense. But you're using what people with hearing impairment would do. They would need captions on their videos.
All the time. And if you don't have captions, or if a video doesn't have like that addition, like what you do, if you're scrolling up and down your phone, it's like, okay, if it's in the morning, so I normally wake up very early and my partner's still asleep. Okay, I'll just watch a couple of videos, check TikTok or whatever. If there's no captions, then it's like, okay, scroll, don't even look at it. So it is a direct need. And you do say around about 60% of videos are watched with audio, where that then leaves 40% of videos without audio. So you need captions for like just getting across your message. It doesn't have to be loads, but it still needs that, doesn't it? So for everyone at home then, if they was to then start auditing their own site, what advice would you have them to do?
If they are, sorry, come again when you mentioned auditing. Yeah,
so if they was to then look at their own site, what are the basic things that they would potentially start to look at? And then obviously, if they don't want to do that stuff, go on to Tang Inclusion. You guys can help them all out, advise them and stuff. But if there's just little ones, so you mentioned about contrast, is there anything easy that they can do just so they can start getting their feet wet?
Oh, okay. Few things. Contrast is big. Okay, make sure they don't use pixel-based fonts. They use PT or EM that can be scalable. So other things that they can do, it's try to use tap on the keyboard and tap through all the links and buttons and controls, and see if they can just use tab, space, and enter key to use them. If not, which means it is customized and keyboard users can't use them. Very likely screen readers users will have difficulty as well. Table wise, ensure that they have good semantics. Make sure they don't actually use table itself as a way to actually format the text. They can use div instead. And forms labels, particularly form labels, if they're using the HTML form labels like label tag, make sure you have a for property that actually associate to the input that they use. Often what people tend to do is just use the input, but just use a normal standard text.
Mm.
So visually, it's a label, but screen reader does not show the semantics at all.
Yeah, it doesn't show the connection, so that makes sense. And then for everyone else or everything else, just come to you guys and let you guys.
Yeah, there are more complex ones which it's hard for normal users to just test it by themselves. But there are also situations that the components that they design needs to be customized, and there's, for instance, carousel, drop down accordion and stuff like that, sortable tables. So they can actually look at online. There are a lot of resources to help them to make it accessible. But if, for instance, the developers don't have time to actually pick up all of this, and that's where they can acquire help from professional services.
That makes sense.
To speed them up, to tell them where went wrong and how to fix them. Yeah,
no, that's perfect, and I think that's what you've done very well over your whole career, from being senior lecturer and then program leader at like a very high Liverpool-based university, just teaching for years, and it comes through in everything that you're saying now, and it comes through inside your business. So yeah, I think we'll just leave it there, and I would just want to say thank you very much, Dee. It's been great chatting, and thanks very much. Cool.
Yes, thank you.